This is Read Aloud number 2 from the book Triumph and Survival by Kay Rose. First, a reminder that there is mention and content in our reading today of sexual violence, emotional and spiritual abuse, as well as mentions of suicidal thoughts and attempted suicides within these pages. I've tried to be very straightforward and raw in my writing. Therefore, I urge the readers to get support if they need it while reading. Remember, the suicide hotline is 988, and it is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Please be aware of your mental health while reading. Today, we are in the greenhouse. There is a coworker where we left off. Let's see what it says. Okay, it describes hands-off courtships in Mennonite circles. "6 weeks of working at the greenhouse. No!" I finally found the sound of my voice. I cried, wrestling, trying to get my hands from his grasp. Just then, the greenhouse doors opened. His older sister walked in. Irvin stood up and turned away. He stumbled toward the back of the greenhouses, tucking in his shirt and running his fingers through his hair as he went. I stood up too and straightened my dress. I dropped my eyes as his sister glared at me. "Go home," she ordered in a stern, cold voice. At first I didn't know if she was angry because I had said no to Irvin, or if she was blaming me for having just found her brother with his hands all over me. However, I was relieved, embarrassed, scared, and confused. I drove home immediately. Once at home, I didn't say anything to anyone there. For one thing, I didn't know how to talk with anyone about what I had just gone through. But I was also holding my breath for a phone call from the greenhouse owners, or from the bishop of our congregation. It would be someone calling, someone who would be accusing me of doing something wrong. I knew that it had to be coming. I thought I was to blame. I thought it was my fault. In my ignorance and in a typical victim fashion, my thoughts ran that I had somehow, unknowingly, done something that brought this behavior down upon myself, even though I was a minor. The male was an adult, and I had never once initiated any of the violations. It is common for abuse survivors to have thoughts that they quote, should have, unquote, avoided the mistreatment somehow. But this is not an indication of truth. Rather, it is a sign that someone has been badly harmed in order that they can believe they are the one at fault. I insert this teaching here so that when you listen to young people talk someday, you might recognize warning signs when someone is in danger. Minors never ask to be violated. Girls are not at fault in date rapes. Wives are not responsible for being bullied into doing things for their husbands that they don't like to participate in. Abuse is abuse, no matter if the victim tells you that it is their fault, or if they say to you, I caused this to happen. Believe the facts, not the thoughts that whirl as a result of another human being using power and control over someone. And then it was evening. The phone rang. It was Irvin's sister wanting to talk with me. She told me, there has been a lot of suspicions circulating about what is happening between you and my brother. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Don't ever come back to work in the greenhouse. She also told me, if girls would stay in their places, this type of thing wouldn't happen. Those words still ring in my head. I hear them when I see a young girl in shorts. I hear them when I see a man looking at me or toward my child. I hear them when I'm shopping for clothes or jewelry. I hear them when someone comments on my appearance. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a dollar store when a young man came up to me and said, I just wanted to say I think you look very beautiful. Oh, I hate it when that happens. I hear the words again, an echo of those words which she accused me with, ringing louder than ever in those times. I hear them in my memory when men look at my child or comment on her appearance. Just the other day, a man handed my child a bag of chips, commenting on her lovely smile. It took everything within me not to burst into angry tears and demand that he leave her alone. Instead, I smiled and calmly thanked him like a proper, normal mom. If girls would stay in their places, this type of thing wouldn't happen. I wondered, was my dress not long enough? Was my head covering too small? Were my socks not dark enough? Was my soap too fragrant? Did I smile too much? What did I do to invite his behavior? I've asked myself this question multiple times now. I still struggle with it in my mind often. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I was too friendly, I falsely accuse myself. I remember sitting on the sewing room floor, telling my mom that evening, I'm not going back to the greenhouse. I can still smell the scent of new fabric. I can hear the whir of her sewing machine. I can hear Mom's matter-of-fact, no-nonsense voice. I don't remember the rest of our conversation. But I remember I didn't feel safe enough to go into any details. Mom's short, clipped responses to every comment or open-ended statement I make scare me. I remember seeing the silent disappointment shining in her eyes. That still scares me. I don't live with her, I don't see her, I don't talk to her. And yet she scares me. If I saw her in a store today, I would begin to sweat, shake, cry, and walk the other way. And this is the point where people often ask me, why didn't you just quit the job? Someone with greater experience than I have at this time gives this recommendation as follows. Asking this question moves the focus on the criminal behavior off the perpetrator and instead places it on a child. Isn't it also then placing a higher focus on what you did or didn't do, even as a child, to protect yourself? I'm reminded that I was a child then. I was a victim. It was not my fault. No matter what I did or didn't do, I was a minor and not at fault. I'm also reminded that I did speak up. I did, in a very unclear way, ask for help. As a 16-year-old that day when I told my mom, I'm quitting. I asked for help again when I turned 18 years old. Yet, I was told then to leave the community. I was told it was my fault again. That's something every victim already believes about themselves. It is a lie. We do not ever cause someone to mistreat us. It is not my fault. And it wasn't anything I did inadequately or wrongly that brought this on. It was the choice of the perpetrator to do these acts. I kept going over and over and over it in my head today. There has to be a way that I could have left that job. I quote unquote should have just stopped. But then the question arises, what would I have told my family? I couldn't just quit. That for them would never have been good enough. Nor could I tell them the truth. That would have caused more problems. So what could I have done? I want to encourage other young people or persons in any similar situations to find someone whom you trust. I know this might sound impossible, and in some situations there is no safe person. Make sure it's someone you trust 100%. If you do find such a safe person, tell them about what's going on. Ask if it's normal or if it's all right for things like this to happen and go on. If you don't have a safe person and you know your parents would allow you to quit if only you had a good, rational reason, try to figure out how to find that one reason. Come up with a reason to quit. I'm not saying you should lie, but find a way to protect yourself. Remember, your emotional safety is just as important as your physical safety. You need to feel safe in your own workplace. You cannot focus on your work and do a good job of it if you are scared all the time. Underline for emphasis. Remember that none of this is your fault. You are perfect as you are. You have nothing to apologize for. You are an amazing person, and you deserve a good life. Know that child sexual abuse, in fact, is a crime in all 50 United States. You don't have to live with it. You don't have to endure it. You definitely don't have to feel alone while you work through the healing processes. I kept everything about my experiences to myself. I quit working there, as I was asked to do by the perpetrator's sister. I started working as a maid in a different family among our church people nearby. I still remember the job quite clearly. They had a newborn baby and 3 toddlers. They were an interesting family and did things quite differently from the way we did it in my family. It was a welcome break, and I felt mostly safe while I was with this family. Until one day, the mother, we'll call her Becky, announced we would be going to the greenhouse for garden plants. My heart dropped. My mouth went dry. Tears stung my eyes. I couldn't speak. I was shaking, but nobody seemed to notice or care. I was so scared of going to that place. We all got in the minivan. We drove the short distance to the greenhouse. While Becky found her plants, I stood outside watching her kids. The baby was only a couple of months old. I kept him in the infant carrier, rocking it gently to keep him asleep. I hope she's done soon. I hope she's done soon, I kept thinking. But my thoughts did not telegraph to Becky the urgency to hurry up the process. Irvin was already making his way towards me. You know, someday, soon, that could be my baby you're rocking, he whispered, slyly as he brushed against my arm. I froze. trying to slow my rapid, shallow breathing. But it wasn't working. Oh no, I wish we could leave, I kept telling myself. He walked past me again. I'll put a pink pen in my shirt pocket at church on Sunday, he whispered. It'll be a baby girl. This was the day I realized that even though I don't work at the greenhouse, he still controls me. He could still do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. I wasn't safe while I was alone, or when I went in the church basement. I wasn't safe in my bedroom. I wasn't safe even at my new job. I couldn't tell anyone, because if I did, he had told me I will kill myself. He had even told me how he would do so. He had said, I'll hang myself on the telephone wire in front of the church house. Then I'll be considered a murderer, I thought. From a young age, I had been taught that the Bible says, Thou shalt not kill. Taking a human life is evil, and doing so is a sin that God will punish. If you sinned, God will send you to hell. If you choose to repent, you still have a price to pay. Once the church decides you are truly sorry, you will need to stand up in church and say, I am sorry. Even after you apologize, you still have the stigma of being a person who has sinned big, and the feeling of wondering if maybe God would never totally forgive you. Maybe you'd still go to hell. The spring I turned 17, my mom and I went back to the greenhouse to shop. As I handed the credit card to Irvin, he looked me in the eye and ran his hand along my forearm before taking the card from my hand. I shuddered, remembering all the unwanted touches that I had received from this man. Today I struggle with any greenhouses. The scent, the flowers, the tomato plants, and the fear that maybe a man will come around the corner and brush against my arm. I rarely go into greenhouses. The last time I went was when my sister and one of her friends invited me to go along for a day of shopping. But on the whole, I try to stay away from greenhouses. I do miss working with the soil and plants. Maybe someday I can work through it and enjoy working with the soil again. Irvin never did anything oral with me. He wanted to, and he asked me for it, so I was educated enough later in life that my ex, Jacob, wouldn't have needed to make me watch porn in order to teach me how. Irvin kissed me on the mouth and groped me, along with a slew of other things he did. Irvin would ask, or rather state, to me, "Is this okay?" as he kissed me or touched me. It didn't matter what I answered. If I said no, he'd try to convince and connive to pressure me into it. If I said yes, I would always feel as though I were doing a wrong deed. He would then also remind me that if I said anything about what is happening, I would be visiting him in jail. That's a consciousness of guilt. He knew it was criminal. We can't have babies while I'm in a cell, he'd say. We can't do anything more than touch one another. Then, if the whole world is going to find out, if we plan on making babies, we need to get married. Most times I didn't answer him. Sometimes I just stood there. Other times I'd back up or push him away. Occasionally I would say no. Although I would always feel as though I did something wrong when I did say no. I never agreed to do anything he said or did to me. I felt torn, though. Sometimes I did want to know what his touches would feel like. Sometimes I felt as if it might make me feel better inside. But regardless if I said yes or no, I now understand that I was a child. I was a minor child, and therefore I could not give consent to what he was asking me to do. Children do not have the ability to consent. Until you turn 18, you are legally or by state laws considered a child. Ages of consent vary from state to state, so please make sure you know your state's laws before engaging in any kind of sexual activity or sexual conversation. That being said, until your partner verbally consents, you are not permitted to engage in any type of sexual contact. If I don't say yes, then you don't have permission to touch me whatsoever. Over the next 2 years, I tried to find myself. I tried to heal. I tried to move on from the assaults. I went to church on Sundays and attempted to be a good Christian woman, despite questioning my very existence. I wondered, how can I be a good Christian woman and do what is right while attending a church that's filled with men? Men I was scared to trust, nervous to be alone with. When I had previously thought Mennonite men were the only safe ones. That they were there to protect women. Now I was afraid to be around any man alone. As time went on, I withdrew into myself and became very suicidal. I changed from being an outgoing, bubbly person into a withdrawn, angry young woman. I won't go into details here of how that cycle broke. I've written about it in Book 1, Building with Dust and Ashes. But I'll look at it briefly with you. At the age of 18, I had a conversation with another troubled young Mennonite woman. I finally told her about what happened in the greenhouse. we encouraged each other to report our sexual assaults to a third party. I did so, and through this, it was reported to law enforcement for me then. Irvin was charged, but his bail was posted. He was back out on the streets awaiting sentencing. The church went together to hire him a lawyer, and everyone knew that with it being my word against his, he'd likely get off easy. I had a meeting with a minister at the Athens Mennonite Church, the only person in the ministry there whom I trusted at the time. This trust was greatly misplaced, and it further damaged my confidence in myself. It damaged my ability to trust anyone after the meeting. This minister and his wife spun the entire situation into me being complicit. It was your fault as much as Irvin's, they stated. I want to write that they lied, but I will stick strictly with the facts and the data. They stated flatly. Later on, when they accused me of lying, I did call out their dishonesty. When the rest of the church was notified about what was happening and my name was given out, Irvin and Kay had an affair, they said. Note: when we mislabel child sexual assault as an affair, it completely ignores the fact that children are not able to give consent to sex by law. This also minimizes the harm caused by these criminal acts upon children. It's important to label these acts as what they are. In this case, it is child sexual abuse. I was shattered. I promised myself right then and there that I'd never trust anyone at that church ever again. I was excommunicated for talking about my experience. I was asked to move out of my parents' house. The one minister and his wife whom I had trusted betrayed me. I was devastated. I was broken. It felt as if my heart had broken, and my entire body had been torn into tiny bits. I cried until there was no tears left. I felt nothing but searing pain. As time went on, the pain turned into a numbness that I had never felt before. I was at a dangerous place both physically and emotionally. Feeling nothing but numbness, I wanted to end it all. That, then, brings us to a point a few years later. Additional note from the editors. Minors within insular communities like tight Mennonite circles don't often have access to physicians, nurses, school counselors, domestic violence personnel, or youth ministers. Since these behaviors do run in families and in rings, there was no counselors, no aunt, no community leader, no employer in Kay's environment who is trustworthy enough for her to ask to help her. Even another adult neighbor wouldn't have believed her if she'd run over or driven in and asked for help in finding safety. She didn't know what to ask. She didn't know that what was happening was not her fault in the slightest. She didn't know it was criminal activity against the law. It's so critical that especially single adults are connecting intentionally, relationally, and being available to younger individuals. It's so critical that we are approachable and that we sometimes ask them some interesting questions, proving ourselves willing to go to bat for the well-being of younger people. Young folks need connected relationships with those safe adults who will sense when something isn't right. When a youth needs a strong shoulder and a listening ear, we must intervene. A victim or survivor always feels they are to blame. Kay's story tells us that and clearly illustrates why it is necessary that we do not let the young people flounder on unheeded. Even if Kay had spoken to any quote-unquote worldly neighbor, she would still have faced a lot of backlash and had the same shame and excommunication placed upon her. Placed upon her as a minor child, just for speaking of the unmentionable with someone who is outside the church's community. As a minor, she wouldn't have had been able to leave home for safety. She would have needed to attend church with her parents and face her abuser, as well as the consequences handed out by the church leaders. As a teenager, you cannot possibly have the life experience to know how to react in such a situation. Author's additional note. While writing this, the question was brought up, what would have happened if you would have reported it when it happened at age 16? Wouldn't social services have stepped in and removed you and the other children from your parents' home? From what I have been able to find out about this question, and from everyone I've talked to, the only way a minor is removed from their parents' care and custody during a situation like this is if the parents are considered an accessory. Say, if my parents knew about the abuse and yet did nothing about it, or say they even actively helped to cover up the child's sexual abuse. Or rather, if my parents would have said that they will support me and get me help from qualified trauma therapists, if they would have said that they feel awful about what happened, that they had no idea that it was happening, then we children would not have been removed. If a parent is cooperative with the social service workers and attends such education classes that are recommended, Children in a home are not likely to be separated from their primary caregivers. Beautiful spring flowers pictured to break the pain. Our story picks up in September of 2020. 2 months prior to September, in July, I had received a message from Jacob Borntrager, replying to a Facebook story I had put up. I had no idea what the story was anymore. I don't remember his exact words in the message. I do remember it started with, "Hello, my friend." I remember this because everyone is referred to as my friend by Jake. I didn't reply right away, but eventually I asked him what he wanted after he had messaged me a few more times. He replied that he wanted to get to know me better and wanted to be Facebook friends. To this, I agreed. I had been messaging with Jacob for a little while now, and he wanted us to meet. I agreed. I felt safe talking to him. He knew what the plain lifestyle was like, and he seemed very trustworthy to my bruised and girlish heart. He said he was 10 years older than I. I was naive enough to believe his statement. In fact, he was in his 30s. I was 19. I got off work at 6 a.m. and didn't need to work my second job since it was a Saturday. As I write this, my heart races. I'm taken back to that day. I was so nervous. Now, knowing what I know, I can imagine how this day could have gone very badly. I play over different scenarios in my mind. It scares me. I have a lot to be thankful for. I'm still alive. I'm free now. It could have gone so terribly. I remember the yellow-flowered shirt and the sunny yellow skirt I was wearing. Oh, how I loved that skirt. I remember almost everything about that day, down to how the air smelled. Who served us breakfast at the small diner in Thorpe? This yellow-flowered shirt still hangs in my closet. Why I don't get rid of it, I'm not sure. I haven't worn it in a long time. The yellow skirt I threw out 2 years ago, after leaving Jacob. It felt so good to throw away something Jacob used to ask me to wear regularly. The love for that skirt withered and died while I was with Jacob. He took me out for breakfast, and then I requested that he take me back to my car, which he had insisted I leave parked where we met. He refused to do that, saying he wanted to see my place. I told him I live an hour away. I just want to go back to my car and go home. He refused to take me back. So I gave in. We drove all the way back to my house, and once again I asked to now be taken back to my car. He said he wants to spend the day with me. I was fine with that, but I just wanted my car with me on the premises. I was feeling stranded, vaguely uneasy now. without having any premonitions of evil. A woman's car is her independence and her escape route. He had me cut off from my resources to get away in the event of evil. But I was young, naive, and fairly unaware. He was a stranger to me. A stranger inside my house, alone. Finally, I gave in and started a load of laundry. I began my house cleaning tasks. He walked all around following after me, asking questions, suggesting we go to a park down the road. I told him I have household tasks to do and I need some time to finish them up. I was also tired. I had just worked a 112-hour work week. Just having gotten off a 20-hour shift, I wanted some time alone. My overnight job did have some sleeping privileges, which made it easier to be awake. I had thought we were just going to have a quick breakfast together, meet one another in person the first time, and that's it. But Jake had other plans for today. As I took my basket of clean laundry upstairs, Jacob grabbed me, picked me up, and carried me into my bedroom. I started screaming, asking to be set down. He laughed and set me on the floor in my bedroom. I was shaken. I told him again I really need to get some work done, and I need to take a nap. He insisted he would stay. He said he could help me with the work to be done. I didn't want that. I told him we really need to go get my car. Finally, he agreed, and we went out to his pickup. But instead of taking me to my car, he took me to the park down the road from my house. He suggested we go on a walk through the park. I reluctantly agreed. I was a bit confused about how to feel about Jacob taking me to the park rather than to my car. But it was peaceful and beautiful walking through the trees. We didn't speak much, and I was enjoying the colorful leaves in the brisk fall breeze. Finally, Jacob was ready to leave, and we went back to get my car. I fell asleep on the drive back. I was so worn out. Jacob messaged multiple times that night. I slept through a lot of them, but replied once or twice. I tried getting the point across to him that Saturdays are my day to rest and catch up on sleep. He replied, "You work too much." I wanted to say no shit, but no one else will do it for me. Instead, I ignored him. The following day, Jacob contacted me saying he wants me to meet his Amish mother. Hesitant, I agreed. I thought maybe it would be nice to have a community again, to have some friends, people who might understand my lifestyle, and those who speak my own language. I'll never forget what I wore that day, or really anything about the visit. I wore a long black skirt and a black blouse. Meeting his family was awkward, but pleasant. For the most part, we had a nice time, and we didn't stay too long. His mom was polite to me that day, But when we left, she made the comment, "Don't make too many babies." I was a bit disgusted and quite surprised that she would say something like that. His uncle, however, was very uncomfortable to be around. He made comments about Amish girls' tight skirts and how some of them don't wear underwear. I was grossed out about this. After meeting them, we went back to the park close to my place again. We talked for a bit, and he mentioned his place is closer to my other job. He suggested I stay with him there. I liked the idea because it would cut down on my driving times, and I would save money on rent. I told him I'd think about it. The very next day, he reached out and asked, "Have you decided?" I responded, "I'll move." I started packing. I was kind of excited. It was a new beginning, getting out of the community that had disowned me, having a blank sheet to restart my life. I imagined we would share an apartment just as roommates. He hadn't asked me to be a girlfriend. I wasn't even thinking about starting a relationship at that point in time. Almost immediately after I moved in, it became apparent that he thought we were in an intimate partner relationship. He seemed to enjoy watching pornography on the big screen TV anytime I was in the room. It was his way of telling me it was time to have sex. I tried to ignore it, but if I didn't engage, he'd force me to participate. He would force himself on me. I felt trapped, but I was unsure what to do with things. I remember the first time we had sex. It was a Sunday evening. He asked me to go on a drive with him. I wasn't working that day, and I was okay with getting out of the apartment for a bit. We drove around for a few hours and then stopped at a park. We sat and talked about the random things in life. We could relate on many levels, as we both had come from plain culture backgrounds. I confided in him about why I had to leave the culture. When I told him why I left, he brushed the hair out of my face and told me he'd always keep me safe. I felt strangely comforted at that moment. Then he pulled me close and began kissing and caressing me. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but I decided to go along with whatever this older male suggested. Then he laid back in his seat and pushed up my skirt. My brain screamed, "Stop!" but my mouth won't say it. My thoughts are jumping all over the place. Do I want this? Should I push him away? Should I tell him to stop? What would happen if I tell him to stop? Will he kick me out of his apartment? Will he take me back to my own car? As these thoughts are racing through my head, I stay limp. I was jolted back to reality when he unzipped his pants and tried to push his hard dick into my vagina. I was freaked out and jumped. He chuckled and asked, "Is this your first time?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled away some more. "It's okay," he assured me. "I took 3 other girls' virginity. I can be very gentle." This attempt at reassurance did not help matters at all. I was still uncomfortable and wanted to get out of there. But instead I lay down on the seat as I was told to do. Jacob got on top of me. I really freaked out when I saw his penis. It was huge to me. How is that thing ever going to fit inside of me? I wondered. I knew what would happen next because of the time I'd spent working in the greenhouse. I was educated enough not to have to worry about wondering that. After we had sex, I was feeling quite shaken up and scared. I sat up and pulled down my skirt. "We're going to need to do it regularly," he remarked. "It'll get easier." By regularly, he meant 3 more times that night, twice on the picnic tables at the park, and once when we got back home. I was feeling numb emotionally, as well as physically by this time, and I felt scared. My petite, undernourished body couldn't take this level of rough sexual activity. I wanted him to stop it, but I was scared by the behavior, and I didn't know how to react. Anyone who knows me today knows when I want something to stop, just by listening to me and watching me. I know that if Jacob would have cared about me in the least, he would have noticed my discomfort and fright. Even so, I didn't say anything directly to him about my feelings that day. So for that reason, I don't hold it against him. I consider myself to have been an agreeable and consenting adult. It was not a delightful, euphoric experience for me, giving him my body. But after years of self-loathing and feeling dirty and angry with everything that had happened to my body, feeling some tangible physical pain was something I believed I needed. Even though it was painful, I felt I deserved it and needed it. I craved it. Yet I hated it. I didn't want it. All at the same moment. It was just a week later Jacob asked me to marry him. By this point in time, we were having sex daily, sometimes multiple times a day. I was quite sure I was pregnant. Even though I didn't like what was happening and didn't feel comfortable with the situation, I didn't know where else to go or what to do about my circumstances. I was still struggling with the fact that I had been taught not to say no to men, nor question their decisions. I didn't know I had a say in any matter, or a right to name my personal preferences. I didn't know I could say no to sexual activities. I think I first realized I could say no while I was giving my statement after I left Jacob, and the police chief told me then that anyone is allowed to say no at any time. But even today, I still find it challenging saying no to people in authority. Anyone older than me, or to men of any age. If I am asked to pick up a shift at work or loan someone money, I find it difficult to say no. In my personal life or relationships, I find it difficult to say no. If you have read my first book, Building with Dust and Ashes, you might remember reading about the time I went to Pennsylvania to visit a friend I had met on Facebook. This lovely woman, whom I call Rachel, offered that I could come and stay with her. But her husband made me feel just as uncomfortable as Jake did, and moving to Pennsylvania seemed far away and scary to me. I finally took a pregnancy test and found out I was indeed pregnant. I made a doctor's appointment and confirmed that I was pregnant. I also found out at that point that there were 2 heartbeats. I was pregnant with twins. I was scared and excited both. This positive pregnancy also felt like a confirmation that I needed to marry Jacob and everything would turn out okay. Photo of purple dahlias. The wedding was small. A couple of ex-Mennonite girls came early. My maid of honor did my makeup. While she did the makeup, Jacob took a shower. I went into the bathroom to check the makeup in the mirror. Jacob got out of the shower, saw my face painted, and pushed me up against the wall, trying to scrub the makeup off with his towel. As I begged him to stop, he choked me and said, "My girls don't wear makeup." He was still viciously scrubbing my face with his towel. "Please, it's my wedding day. It's the first time I'm wearing makeup," I cried. Finally, he slowed down and pushed me away. I looked in the mirror again and used my fingers to smooth it over a bit. He was livid, and I knew that if he didn't have something significant happen throughout the day, I'd be in big trouble that evening. The wedding celebration went smoothly. We had pizza and ice cream for dinner. Jacob's aunt, whom I had never met before, came. My oldest cousin also came. I respect and adore this cousin. He is the only extended family member I still speak with. He has been a great support to me over the past several years. We had a good time. There was no music or dancing, but there was food, laughter, and fun conversation. Jacob must have forgotten about my horrible makeup. He didn't say anything about it that night. We went to bed feeling happy and on good terms.